Welcome, and today we're going to have a little look at some old Civil War photos, some World's Fairs photos, and some arches found throughout our plain. And finally we'll touch on some of the anomalous California fires, if they let us, and I do hope you enjoy. And here we're going to look at a little film of the Civil War, looking for clues, and this is a film of the Civil War veterans. And here's some more Civil War photos. Very strange. I'd first seen such pictures in a search engine. Not sure what exactly is going on here. This man not seeming very comfortable. None of them really, just very awkward. And why pose like this? And photo after photo, seeming very strange, and really the entire Civil War just being a giant photo op, not seeing any pictures of battle, and just pretty ridiculous. Even these uniforms all over the place. You're gonna wear a bow tie to battle? And why? Why portray soldiers in this way? Here are a lot of Masonic symbolism with the hand in the coat, and not seeming like men of war. Not one of them. Really a strange showcase of photos. And what can we make of this? Here we're given names, and really these men not seeming like they have seen a single day of battle. Rather they have been drinking. Not sure how we can be shown photos of the Civil War and believe that it was what we were told. Just this lot of pictures alone should raise a serious amount of suspicion. Unidentified soldiers in Union uniforms and dress gloves for this guy. Again, two unidentified soldiers, and pretty ridiculous. Arms interlocked. Absolutely strange. And here this American flag and whole background seems to be fake. These men seem to have put on these uniforms and were asked to pose in front of this fake background. 3 unidentified soldiers in front of a painted military camp scene backdrop. So there we go. There's our Civil War. Backdrops. There wasn't enough. And here smoking these cigars for each other. Was this before or after a great battle? And here, a young soldier on the right with a cavalry saber. Not sure. Seeming like a woman. But who knows? Moving on. Again, unidentified soldiers. And Sergeant Robert Black and Private Herman Beckman of Company F. Very strange. And here's an interesting one. The unidentified soldiers in the Trans-Mississippi Confederate battle shirts. Here's your battle shirts. The Trans-Mississippi battle shirts. Absolutely silly, looking like a couple of puppets. Anyone sent out to battle wearing this uniform is surely expecting a quick death. And who knows what we're really seeing here. This is just absolutely ridiculous that these men would even be called soldiers. Really seeming like confused orphans asked to do things that they may not want to do. It really is the impression I get. Here are a couple more soldiers, and here we have 2 Confederate soldiers. Some more posing out in the battlefield, and a glimpse at these massive cannons, not seeming like things that these people could move around with horse and buggy in the Civil War era. This one seeming to have been partially destroyed, perhaps by using it in an improper fashion. And here I've just done a search for Civil War photos. I'm just looking for legitimate photos. And what are we seeing here? I think what we're seeing is an inheritance beginning at this point. And when it comes to the United States, perhaps everything before this point is a complete lie. These cannons don't belong to these people, and these people are not fighting a battle. Their clothes varies so much, as if they were all just given one pair and sent off on their way. And by the looks of it, these characters are all privileged in some kind of way. Perhaps not as privileged as the people who were going to the world's fairs, and such people seem to be having the greatest privilege. And maybe we'll have a little look at some World's Fair photos. And here we go. The ridiculous World's Fairs, seeming completely boring and similar to the Civil War, just a lot of posing and what seemed like staged photos. And today I was talking to a friend who's supposed to be getting a $50 million loan, and I suggested that we build an arch of triumph. His idea is to build a city of the future, a city where all are welcome, something that I've always loved the idea of. And at this point in my life, I feel blessed to have met someone who's actually pursuing this and has procured funding for this project. Very exciting, and he liked the idea of having an arch spanning across a major highway and perhaps being the centerpiece of a small city. And so immediately the next question is how to build an arch. Now I'm familiar with building skateboard half-pipes, pretty much this structure upside down, usually built with 2x4 and a masonite type of wood. But something of this nature, let's have a peek at this one, would be very difficult to find a contractor. And yet now I have a reason to contact one. And if you have any suggestions as to who would give an honest bid on constructing something like this, I would love to hear any leads that you might have. And so many different styles. And just a guess, I might imagine upwards of 20 million to build something like this. Just a guess, no idea really. This one here seeming to be made of beautiful brick and just flaunting their abilities. Nobody sets brick this way that I've ever seen in recent times. And the ornamentation and contours, just overkill. And for what? What is the purpose of an arch? Just to flaunt triumph? Perhaps. Perhaps that's sufficient. But I don't think so. Something much less elaborate would suffice. And here we can see some types of gargoyles or bats. And here seeming to depict the whole story, if only we could understand the meanings. Perhaps as simple as an icon on an everyday phone, somebody in the past could read each one of these, clear as could be, and tell us the meaning. But with our amnesia, not really understanding what we're seeing here. Perhaps you do, and if you do share below, as we're all figuring this out together. And here as well, clearly some sort of story, and perhaps some important characters. And I believe I was watching a New Earth video some time ago, and she was talking about this particular arch and trying to rebuild these horses. It may have been somewhere else, and not being able to cast such a thin bronze or copper, and just having a very difficult time replicating just the very ornamentation on the top. The modern casts that we made were way too heavy and way too thick, even with the most modern of abilities. We fell short of simply replicating these statues and making them structurally sound on top of this building. But nevertheless, I'll be optimistic and give somebody out there the benefit of the doubt, and perhaps we can get an estimate on building something like this. Even this one being rather small. And here's a glorious arch in Pyongyang. Really fascinating, just a monster. And I'd like to see a better picture of this one. And I believe this is it. Very interesting, and clearly telling a story, along with having some other kind of function. And here we can see the remains of an old Arch of Triumph in Syria, in the city of Palmyra. A framed print of the Chicago World's Fair. Of course, buildings built for temporary usage and torn down, we know the story well. And here another little peek at this glorious temporary city. And just really boring. These people look bored, just standing around because there's nothing to do. You could go up here in this building, or you could come down here in this mess of people. Either way, maybe some food in these tents, here and here. And look how impressive. I mean, the money that has been spent just in the background here. And really all these people probably want is some refreshments and a hot dog. They don't need all this, or all this. Again, besides viewing this beautiful architecture, a world's architectural fair, maybe. But besides that, pretty boring. Not to mention, you're taking a horse and buggy across the country, in some cases across the world. It is a world's fair. You have to take a boat, and now a horse and buggy. Pre-public transportation. What a pain. And for this. And really a lot of posing, as usual. This seeming silly. And these first inheritors just making claim to all this real estate and buildings and charging admission, making $1 and rewriting our history, and eventually removing most evidence of this world, selling off the real estates, chopping it up into fine pieces, and we wouldn't really question any of this for more than 100 years. And this was just shared with me by Melanie. I thank you for this share. And it's pretty graphic, and it shows these anomalous fires in California, and for the first time seeing the interior. Here appears to be a driver and a passenger. And I started watching these fires carefully before I even started making videos, and still seeming like the greatest threat in our present reality, still having very little answers to what kind of fires sweep through neighborhoods and ignite cars in this way. What kind of fire finds you sitting in your car, unable to escape, turning your windshield into dust and the rims on your car, and doesn't burn the vegetation around you, doesn't burn or melt the plastic garbage cans found all over the place. And this was a first-hand account of someone and their cell phone, and naturally it was removed. I don't know why I think I'll have any better chance sharing this but I just thought I'd have a go, as it's only about 40 seconds, then it seems to cut out. And I'd like to play the audio for you, but I won't, as it may be the most graphic part of this video, only because his reaction is so honest. Apparently the man filming was spared, and this was his friend and his mother in this vehicle. And when we see evidence of all of this building melting and destruction all throughout our realm, I think that we're dealing with something very similar to what in more recent times, as seen in this video, is depicting a force capable of completely annihilating everything in its path. And when we look at the remains of many of these homes, what we see are appliances, bathtubs, toilets turned to powder. And what appears to remain, of course, besides the trees and all sorts of things that should burn, we also see the concrete driveways remaining. So taking down homes, but brick and concrete and some metals, not all, in many cases part of the metals melting. And as seen here, of course, the majority of the car does remain, but the hubcaps usually melt off, the rims, and of course tires are melted. And it must be so with all of these structures of the old world. Everything else, all our ornamentations and anything, any kind of appliances or antiquitech, all melted away. And also reminding me of World War II, and in particular the city in Germany, the city of Dresden. And one can just simply do a quick search on Wikipedia and see the remains of the bodies, in many cases completely burnt out and looking mummified, and yet hair remaining. And such pictures are just available on Wikipedia, but one does get a yellow badge, as Philip has recently called it, and it is not permissible to share such things. So I won't, and perhaps this isn't either. And yet in many cases a strong blast or shock wave must have occurred in unison. Fire may be able to melt, but in many instances, debris scattered all over the place, which seems to me would require a greater force than just fire, and always seeming pretty clear to me that we're dealing with fire and a massive water event as well. And as seen here in Lebanon, fire or water not going to have too much of an effect on a building like this, and truly one of my favorites. Same style we see all over the world, however this one is giant, and clearly seems to have been built by giants. In Algeria, in northern Africa, the country in which my father was born, and at one point a part of France, and an excellent showcase that I found here by accident of lesser known ruins all throughout, and really nothing spectacular, very similar to everything we see scattered throughout this realm, and to most perhaps seeming like a great mystery, but to myself, and I believe anybody watching these videos, making much more sense to us And we could find ruins like this in any part of the plane and not be shocked. Know exactly what we're dealing with. And still not 100% on these amphitheaters, coliseums, but I don't think you're building this for some silly theater or play. Clearly the remains of some technology, some giant machine. And even here, we're told some kind of bath, but maybe some kind of cooling pond for some kind of reactor of some sort. So that's it for today. I do hope you enjoyed, and have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.